So as an anti-war progressive, I am always doing my best to make sure that we never unnecessarily escalate tensions with other countries. I think that we should always push for diplomacy over militarism, but unfortunately for me, peace isn't profitable, and what the military-industrial complex typically wants, it gets. Now, the problem that I'm seeing recently in the media is that they are sensationalizing every story about Russia, and we have a political establishment, both parties, who are hell-bent on escalating tensions with Russia. This could catalyze a new Cold War. It's very dangerous. So I want to talk about all of this Russian hysteria. So we're now in the second round of Russian hysteria, and the first round began when Hillary Clinton alleged that Russian hackers hacked into the emails of the DNC and John Podesta, and they released these emails to the public via WikiLeaks because they wanted to influence the election and tip the scales in favor of Donald Trump. Now, this is problematic, first of all, because there's no way of really assessing the extent to which this hack actually influenced the election at all. I think Hillary Clinton lost because she couldn't mobilize her own base and didn't even campaign in the Rust Belt, hence why she lost in the Rust Belt. Now, second of all, WikiLeaks maintains that Russia didn't give them this information and that they obtained the DNC emails from a DNC insider, and there's also reports that John Podesta's emails were released when he fell victim to a phishing scam. Yet, almost all media outlets characterized the event as a Russian election hacking, which led almost half of Democratic Party voters to believe that they literally hacked into our voting booths. That's not true. Now, finally, even if we can prove that Russia did hack into the DNC and John Podesta's emails, that doesn't diminish the substance and overt corruption that was revealed in those emails. So, I mean, the first round of Russian hysteria was completely nonsensical to me, and I thought that the media, in sensationalizing that story, they misled the public, and here we are again with a new round of Russian hysteria. Now, this second round of Russian hysteria was catalyzed by two stories. First of all, General Flynn's resignation over a leak that revealed he lied about the fact that he was in contact with the Russian ambassador and specifically discussed lifting sanctions. Now, the second reason why we have a new round of Russian hysteria is because a story from the New York Times revealed that Trump's campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence. So my take on this story is a lot different than the analyses that you'll hear in the mainstream media. And look, whenever I cover Russia, I get a ton of hate because I've been accused of being a trumpeter or a Russian shill, or that I'm shilling for the Kremlin. This isn't true. My position on this is influenced by the facts or lack thereof, and by not wanting to escalate tensions with Russia unnecessarily when we don't have the evidence that we need to do so. Now, when it comes to General Flynn's resignation, I think that that was acceptable. He lied to the public. He deceived the vice president. Yeah, you should have resigned. And when it comes to the New York Times story, well, the underlying implication here, in all of the media, not just the New York Times, is that the reason why this is problematic, the reason why Donald Trump's aides having contact with Russian intelligence is scary is because, well, most likely they were colluding to tip the scales against Hillary Clinton. Now, let me just say this. It's not unusual for campaigns to have contact with foreign governments. Trump's campaign had contact with multiple countries, and Hillary Clinton's campaign also had contact with multiple countries. But to state or imply that Trump's campaign and Russia colluded to tip the scales against Hillary Clinton, well, that's not true. And the initial New York Times story that everyone is now sensationalizing doesn't even say that. They explain the intelligence agencies then sought to learn whether the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians on the hacking or other efforts to influence the election. The officials interviewed in recent weeks said that so far they had seen no evidence of such cooperation. But that doesn't stop members of the Democratic Party establishment from making this jump and suggesting that contact does imply that they were colluding.
I'm willing to say the word collusion because I think that the public evidence that is there at the moment certainly, to me, predicts that it would lead to that likely outcome or discovery, and an independent bipartisan investigation is what is absolutely essential to get to the bottom of it.
Now, even though it's tempting to listen to what Debbie Wasserman Schultz has to say, given that she's an expert on election rigging and collusion, The fact is that as of yet, we don't have facts to validate this position. And Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, is saying the same thing.
We've got to understand what these communications were between Donald Trump's aides on the campaign and Russian intelligence officials. You know, we'd been saying from the beginning that the Russians were the ones who stole the information from the DNC, put it out to WikiLeaks. There's a real question now. Were members of Donald Trump's campaign aiding, abetting, or encouraging this to take place? I think we also need answers from Donald Trump. He said to the media that there was no coordination, and what we learned in the New York Times report and from CNN was that he was briefed by intelligence officials about these connections. So he must have known, and yet decided to lie, not tell the truth. So we need to get to the bottom of that.
But of course, the communication and coordination, those are two very different things that gets to the content of these conversations which we do not know. If it would come out, Robbie, that it was these were benign conversations and there was no aiding and abetting, as you said, what then?
Well, I think that's where we need to know the specifics. I don't want to be hypothetical about one thing or another. I can tell you it is extremely strange to me that a member of any American presidential campaign would be speaking to Russian intelligence officials. And it's particularly bizarre given the fact that we know that Russian intelligence officials broke into the DNC and handed them to WikiLeaks for the purpose of hurting Hillary Clinton and helping Donald Trump.
They really want you to think that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to rig the election against Hillary Clinton. Now, this is after they deny that the DNC rigged the election against Bernie Sanders. But look, I want to be clear. In talking about how there's not enough evidence, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. I'm not trying to defend Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is an imbecile. But my dislike of Donald Trump is less important to me than the political establishment and media trying to catalyze a new Cold War. I don't want to escalate tensions with Russia. Now, another angle to the story is that Trump is susceptible to blackmail of some sort, and that, you know, Vladimir Putin has something on him that's getting him to play ball with the Kremlin. But, I mean, many stories that suggested that Trump is being blackmailed, I mean, they were debunked. I mean, take the Golden Shower Gate, for example. This was a way that they wanted to unnecessarily attack Donald Trump, or arbitrarily, I should say, attack Donald Trump, and there was no evidence for it. I mean, it's really, really frustrating to see people falling over themselves to attack Donald Trump, even if the facts aren't there. I mean, we're becoming Republicans in the way that they attacked Hillary Clinton. This is becoming a new Benghazi, but for the left. If we want to attack Donald Trump, he's given us a million things to attack him for. We don't have to make jumps without the evidence. We can actually attack him on the policies that he's implementing that are harming the American people. Now, I do believe that Trump's aides were in contact with Russia. I believe that story. Because Donald Trump has business in Russia, and he has businesses in other countries like Saudi Arabia and Dubai. So, I mean, when the mainstream media hears that his campaign had constant contact with Russia, they think that this is a sign that he colluded with the Kremlin to win the election and rig the election against Hillary Clinton. But I mean, when I hear this, I think it's a sign of corruption. Donald Trump is likely in contact with Russia because Donald Trump is looking out for his business interests. Now, that's still problematic, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's a Russian puppet, which is a dangerous assumption. Now, we know that Donald Trump discusses his business as head of state because when he was on the phone with the president of Argentina, he wanted to talk about the construction of a building in Buenos Aires, and he was hoping that he can get the president to push it through because it was currently pending. Now, we also know that when Nigel Farage called to congratulate him after he won the election, he asked Farage to oppose a wind farm that was being built near one of his golf courses in the UK. So, I mean, I think it's pretty likely that Donald Trump is in contact with countries around the world to ensure that the money train keeps rolling in. And this is a huge conflict of interest. It's an impeachable offense. But, I mean, to suggest that Donald Trump is being blackmailed or that he's working for Vladimir Putin, again, I think that this is really dangerous for a number of reasons. Now, to be fair to the people that are suggesting that there's collusion going on here, well, Donald Trump hasn't done anything to ameliorate these claims.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Obviously, this is one of the dumbest things you could say. If people are already accusing you of being a shill for the Kremlin, you're adding more fuel to the fire. You're giving them ammunition to use against you, idiot. So I think that Donald Trump doesn't help the situations and he lacks self-awareness, but I really want to explain to you why all of this is dangerous. So tensions between the US and Russia have already been pretty tense. I mean, in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. That was illegal. And then as of late, well, the United States, in cooperation with NATO, is lining up troops on the Russian border. So, I mean, tensions are high and the situation is delicate. Yet, I mean, some mainstream media outlets like the Washington Post, they're literally telling Donald Trump, look, if you're not a puppet of Vladimir Putin, then prove it. So here's what's going to happen. And what I feared is going to happen is already happening. In the mainstream media, and the political establishment's attempts at baiting Donald Trump to be tougher on Vladimir Putin, they are going to lead to the escalation of tensions between the United States and Russia. Now, I'm not saying that we don't show strength and that we cower in fear with Russia, but I'm saying that we don't need to unnecessarily poke a beehive when we don't have evidence to suggest that what everyone is accusing Russia of is actually true. And when we have a madman who's in control of the presidency, who's in control of the military, do we really want to poke that guy and influence him to be tougher on a nuclear superpower? I mean, just last week, I talked about how Donald Trump is signaling that he's going to back out of a nuclear treaty with Russia that limits the stockpile of nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia. Now, this was an agreement that was negotiated by President Obama and Vladimir Putin, and it's an agreement that Vladimir Putin wants to keep intact. Yet, on President Trump's first phone call with Putin, he basically told Putin to shove that deal. And during the campaign, he talked about how this was a bad deal for the United States. So, I mean, again, if you really want to push Donald Trump to be tough on Russia, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. Here's the thing, I don't want a new Cold War, and I certainly don't want a new Cold War under a President Donald Trump. The bottom line is that this is the really dangerous game that we're all playing, and I want to share something that Dennis Kucinich recently said that I think is really important.
This isn't about whether you're for or against Donald Trump.
Right.
Hello? Mm-hmm. This is about whether or not the American people are bystanders in a power play inside the intelligence community, the outcome of which could determine our relationships with Russia and whether or not billions of dollars are going to be spent in a new Cold War. And at the bottom of that is money, is an agenda for somebody to cash in on conflict between the U.S. and Russia at any level.
So let me just end with this. Progressives like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have even gotten on board with this story. And Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they've called for investigations into Donald Trump. That's fine. I'm fine with that. I'm always going to be on the side of more information and not less. However, I think this investigation is going to reveal, like I'm speculating, that Donald Trump is corrupt, not that he's working for the Kremlin or that he's a puppet of Putin. And I think that when you keep maintaining this narrative, it's really dangerous. Now, the media talks about this not because the media really cares about the story. The media is sensationalizing the story because sensationalism sells. It's profitable. They make money off of this story. And when they fearmonger, well, I mean, the ratings go up. And the progressives like myself, who oppose all of this saber-rattling and sensationalism against Russia, we're not doing it because we're Kremlin shills. We're not doing this because we like Donald Trump. I've been very critical of Donald Trump. I don't need to prove that I don't like Donald Trump, and I've held him accountable. But we're doing this because this is very scary. It's dangerous. Russia and the United States do not need to be at odds with each other. We need to do everything in our power to repair our relationship with Russia. Now, that doesn't mean that we allow Russia to get away with everything, and it doesn't mean that we don't show strength. But I'm saying that we don't be reckless. We don't be stupid. We don't push a madman who's unhinged to take on Vladimir Putin, to denounce Vladimir Putin, to prove to us that he's not a puppet of Vladimir Putin. It's dangerous. Stop it.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.